You're tuned into news across the galaxy where they talk all things LA Galaxy with the Nag Boys. Let's start nagging.
What is up, fellow G's? Welcome to News Across the Galaxy, the MidWeek show, Western Conference Final Edition. Once again, we have Bryant on the ones and twos. Thank you, Bryant, for a nice tasty jam to get us started. And to help us preview Saturday's Western Conference Final and to give us insight into the Seattle Sounders, we have special guest Cameron Collins, co-host of the Sounders Scuttlebutt podcast. Welcome to the show, Cameron.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Cameron, tell us how you got started with your podcast there and how you got started. And I know before we came on, you mentioned that you have been doing radio for quite a while now. And so how did you transition from doing radio to being part of the Sounders Scuttlebutt podcast?
Yeah, back in 1999, my freshman year of college, I started doing a radio at Santa Clara University down in the Bay Area. And it was a Northwest music show. And then after that, it turned into a punk and ska show for the next 4 years. And then when I moved back home to Seattle in 2003, I started doing a show, a punk rock show still. And that went to about 2013 and I was burnt out. And I said, you know what? I'm going to turn this into an interview show and start podcasting. And so that was, 14 years in? I decided to turn the radio show into the podcast as the radio medium kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
And, I started interviewing local musicians and local interesting people. And I did that podcast for a long time. It's on hiatus right now because I have lots of other podcasts going on. But probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I think actually during the pandemic maybe, just after the pandemic, I mean, we're still in it, but after everything was locked down, I was approached by Aaron Lingley of Scuttlebutt Productions to do a sim of the all-time Oklahoma City Thunder versus the all-time Seattle Supersonics, because we Sonic fans, of course, do not recognize Oklahoma City Thunder as our same franchise, as they were stolen from us. You can check out a movie documentary that I was a producer on called Sonic's Gate. It's for free on YouTube, but it won the Webby Awards for the best sports documentary of that year, and currently is licensed out to CNBC had it first. Now ESPN Classics has it. So anytime Oklahoma City's in the playoffs, they show that on ESPN Classics. So we did that along with the pre-halftime and post-game show host of the Seattle Sounders, Jackson Feltz. And from there, Aaron and I became friends, and he said, hey, I used to do this Sounders podcast with my buddy. He couldn't do it anymore because of family stuff. Do you want to do it? And we rebooted it. And now we are about to have our 100th episode coming up in the next week or two.
Hey, congratulations, man.
Thank you.
By the way, to see he snuck in through the back door. We have Eddie joining us again as well. What's up, Eddie?
What up? Hey, Eddie. I'm not surprised as you guys. I found out. Literally found out around 10 a.m. that we were closing early today.
You know what Eddie doesn't have, though, is the Vancouver Whitecaps cup.
Oh,
that Edgar.
That's what I'm talking about. All the cool kids got the Vancouver Whitecaps cup.
I have lacrosse.
Yeah, that works.
Well, let's talk about the playoff history between these two teams, because you talk to a lot of MLS historians, fans, and they will point to the history that these two clubs have, where at one point or other they have been the standard bearers for Major League Soccer as the golden standard, where LA Galaxy was considered one of the top flight franchises in this league for so long, and Seattle came into the league. And for years, Seattle was knocking on the door, and they kept running into the LA Galaxy in the playoffs until finally they broke through. and they went on to become one of the more powerful clubs in the league's history. And it kind of seems that at this point, well, at one point in the season, people felt that the Sounders were starting to wind down. People felt that maybe they had peaked when they won the CONCACAF Champions Cup. There were some injuries, and there was so much effort to get there, and then it felt like they had plateaued. And at this point, maybe the Sounders were done. They were ready for a rebuild. But before we get into that, let's talk about the history of these two teams, because we talked about it. LA Galaxy and the Sounders have faced each other 7 times in the playoffs. Currently, Galaxy has a slight edge, 4 wins to 3 over the Sounders. But the last 2 times these two teams played each other, it was Sounder victories. But one of them was technically a Galaxy victory, because even though Galaxy lost, I know that dagger by Juninho in the 54th minute of the 2014 MLS Cup playoffs still hurts to this day. Am I right, Cameron?
You are correct. I'm trying to get my video back here. I don't know what just happened. We just turned off here on live video, on live. I tried unplugging and replugging in too, so I apologize for that. We'll get it straightened out shortly here.
Why couldn't that happen to Eddie?
I'll give you a tip. So open your settings and then turn on and turn off that beautification whatever thing, and it'll
there we go.
See, I don't know. I figured out by accident last time.
There. I don't need beautification. Look at me. I'm already beautiful.
Did you try to unplug it and plug it back in?
That's the general IT answer. But all right. So we're talking about that history. Yeah, I mean, every year Seattle would make that run and end up stuck against the LA Galaxy and couldn't win. And I think that was the second life of the Sounders. You start out with like Sounders 1.0, always losing to the Galaxy. Sounders 2.0 is finally beating the Galaxy in the playoffs, moving forward, and then becoming that dominant team that appeared. I think it was win the MLS Cup, lose the MLS Cup, then not go, win the MLS Cup, lose the MLS Cup, and then not go. So over a 6-year period or 5-year period, we went to the MLS Cup 4 times. Unfortunately, Portland won the one time we didn't go the first time, and then they lost the second time. So it seemed like maybe forever it was going to be Seattle, Portland, Seattle, Portland, because there was a 6-year run where it was only teams from Cascadia. But I mean, it with the bringing in Clint Dempsey, which is the last quote unquote superstar that the Sounders have had prior to bringing on Garth Lagerwey as our GM and changing the model for which the Sounders play. Clint Dempsey and Obafemi Martins were fantastic, and but the Sounders never made it to the MLS Cup until finally they moved on from some of the older players like Obafemi Martins, who just couldn't perform in the playoffs. Brilliant, one of the most brilliant players of all time, I'd say, in the MLS. Some of the, I think that same time LA had Robbie Keane, and it was just some amazing back and forth play between the two teams. But everything changed, and then Seattle became the dominant team. Overall, especially you look lately, we've averaged finishing second in the West in our existence. So consistently, we're right up there. We did miss the playoffs one time, and that was after that what was then the CONCACAF Champions League final year. Yeah. We won that, and then things kind of fell apart the rest of that season. But we'll get to it. But yeah, we ended up in a place where we were going to have to do some rebuilding, and yet here we are.
It also took some moving away from an individual who is a link to both clubs and who holds a very important part in the history of this league, and that's Sigi Schmid.
Yeah.
Sigi, who was at the helm of this team when they found glory for the first time with the CONCACAF Champions Cup back in 2001, our Galaxy's U.S. Open Cup and an MLS Cup in 2002, and then once again in 2005, another Open Cup in 2005. So Sigi was a proven winner with LA Galaxy. Ended up with Seattle. Won, what was it, 4 U.S. Open Cups? Am I correct?
Yeah, four. Was it 4 in a row, or was it 3 in a row and then a year off, then a 4th? But yeah, it was pretty incredible run of cups there. I mean,
Yeah.
Seattle was
So
the only team taking U.S. Open Cup seriously. No one else in the league was, and that was because that was the path to Champions League. And other people in the MLS just weren't thinking about that. It's the most automatic way to get in there. You win this cup, you're playing your backups most of the time, and then the final 2 or 3 games you play your starters. So if you just play some extra starters, although the last time we really took it seriously, LA Galaxy kicked our butts. So
You guys were the Arsenal of MLS then, huh? Just
yeah,
winning all those Open
didn't
Cups.
win the league, but we're winning all the other FA Cup, the Coca-Cola Cup.
There you go.
So what I just want to ask about that real quick though. Moving on from Shiggy, was that a real difficult thing to do because he had become such a fixture there and bring you those open cups, right? Which must have accounted for something.
Yeah, I mean, he was the only coach we had ever had, and Brian Schmetzer was the USL coach, but it was brought in as the assistant, who's now, of course, our head coach. But Ziggy was had a special place in our hearts. I mean, my puppy I had at the time was named Ziggy, like after him. So uh, it got to a point though where it felt like to a lot of us he had lost the locker room. Um, I think he represented the kind of the old style of coaching, the yelling, the way that Clint Dempsey is probably a year or two younger than me, but the way that you would have done it before. He and Clint Dempsey weren't speaking by the end of Ziggy's tenure here, and you can't do that with your superstar player. I think that, I mean, there's some players that thrive on that, but I think most people my age, I'm 45 now and younger, uh, do not take to being screamed at. I want constructive criticism. Sit me down and tell me where I can improve, how I can improve. Don't just scream at me. And I think that was Siggy's way, and it wore out over time. Unfortunately, he did pass away after he came back to LA, right? And he was down there, and then
Yeah.
he
Yep.
was in the hospital, and I think he died right. I don't think it was on Christmas Day, but maybe the day after. So, his son was still a part of the Sounders org. He will always have a special place in our heart. But that year they let him go. They went from last place in June to winning the MLS Cup with the second half in league history.
Yeah, I have fond memories of Shiggy himself because I got my press pass with LA Galaxy '97. I covered the team for several years, and I remember when he came in, how you could tell that there was a change in the culture within the locker room.
Mhm.
And I remember meeting his kids. They
Yeah.
were always there in the locker room. But Siggy was always really, he was always a nice guy to talk to. He was always open to speak to. And then he went to Seattle and
Columbus first for a
we,
couple of years took them to a championship.
oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. But I remember after he left Seattle, he was just going around, and I remember like one day I showed up to a match, Galaxy match, and there was this person in front of me, and it was Siggy. It's Siggy and his son. They were in line to get into the game, and not many people recognized them, but I sure did, and I was like, hey, how you doing? And so that was like early in the season, and later in that season, I remember I went to use the restroom. And this guy turns around and he comes out of the stall, and it's Shiggy. He's like, "Hey, what's up?" So that was the last time
Yeah.
I saw Shiggy before. Like shortly after that, he was named Galaxy manager again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely, we have a warm place in our hearts for Shiggy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
LA legend though. LA, I mean, not just with the Galaxy, but UCLA coach. Grew up in
yes,
LA, worked at his parents' German deli down there in LA. So I mean, he's an LA guy through and through.
yeah. Um, So, but it had to take moving away from adopting Brian Schmetzer's plan, which obviously has worked wonders for the Sounders. He's been there for a while now. He's a fixture. Um, but like I was mentioning, Sounders won they got to the peak, right? The Champions League, and it took a lot. I remember there were some injuries. I think it was Giles had suffered a pretty bad injury in that
Yep.
game. Um, and then from there, a lot of people were speculating about what would happen with the Sounders. I know we had Shayan from Grave Green TV early on this season, and he mentioned how he felt that the Sounders were at an impasse where they needed to move on and get rid of the older players and start to rebuild because he felt like this is that's it. They've gone as far as they could. It's time to rebuild. The Sounders aren't really going anywhere. How do you go from that to the Western Conference Final?
Yeah.
How do you go from like a team that some people felt were too old and needed to rebuild to where you are now. How did that happen?
I mean, it was a couple year process going back to that Champions League year. Our GM at that time was Garth Lagerwey, who's now the CEO in Atlanta, and we rewarded those players that won that Champions League with new contracts, and that meant we had them for the next couple of years, and so we were an older team, and it's kind of the cost of rewarding them for that, the cost of going all in for the ones that we signed before that to try and win the Champions League meant that contractually we were kind of stuck. I mean, fans in Seattle were mad we didn't sign anyone in the summer window here, but you really only had, when you had $600,000 to work with under the cap, but you also the transfer fee goes over the years of that contract, so you really had probably 2 to 300,000, and you're not finding a starter for that money. So up against the cap, older players. The one of the biggest issues was no one was executing early on the season. Jordan Morris couldn't hit a shot wide every time. Bad passes, bad defense, bad goalie performances. But that changed all of a sudden, and they started executing. And Jordan Morris went on. I think he had 6 goals in 4 games. Went on a nice little run there, and he's been streaky. He's done that a couple of times, and then hasn't scored for a while. And now he scored last game, so maybe we'll still see it. But this has been the plan all along. As soon as the current GM took over, we were in a situation where we had contracts expiring, but also we were going to go young. It was time to put these young players in and prove it. And that's why you see Georgie Manugu coming off the bench on the right side. That's why you see Reed Baker Whiting starting games. Obed Vargas, who did replace João Paulo after he got injured, was 16 years old at the time. I think he's 19 now. But we have a 19-year-old who's on the Mexican national team now. He switched from the U.S. to Mexico earlier this season and now is getting called up to both the Mexico senior team, and then I think he was in the U21's last break, whatever the international break games there were from Mexico. He was on that team. So here's a kid that 2 or 3 years from now will be starting in Europe somewhere. So they've gone young while in the process. I mean, Raul Ruidiaz isn't playing. He's coming off the bench, right? This is one of the greatest sounders of all time. So João Paulo is coming off the bench, even though he still has the ability to start. Having those people be able to come off the bench, though, is fantastic. But it means at the end of the season, Raul Ruidiaz is gone. He's out of contract. He's not coming back. João Paulo, they haven't even offered him a contract. We'll see what happens, but likely moving on from him. You look at someone like Leo Chu, a young player who's a U22 player. Expensive player to have, but only hitting the cap at what, 150? Is that what the U22 cap hit is? Something like that. So he has another year. They can sign him for another year and he would still be a U22, or they can sign one of the other young players, pay them more money and knock them down to that lower contract value. So you're going to see a new DP come in. You're going to see new young players come in. We are just in this middle of a rebuild. That's this 2-year-long rebuild. And all of a sudden we got hot, best defense in the league. If you can just keep scoring a little bit, you'll get there. So it's been quite the turnaround. And I know, Edgar, you and I were on a show last night discussing this. And our friend from the New York Red Bulls said, well, look who you played. No wonder you won. They were easy teams. But that was A, devaluing how good the teams in the West are, and B, ignoring the play on the field. Because the play on the field changed. Early on, the Sounders would lose to the teams they were supposed to beat, and then occasionally would beat the teams they were supposed to lose to. And then after that, with the exception of Portland, they started playing much better. So I think Seattle is the hottest team right now in terms of record. They're not, if you look at scoring, though, that's obviously the LA Galaxy, who are just a monster. But we're in year one of a 2-year overhaul, and next year is going to be really interesting as they have to re-sign Rusnak, our current DP. We'll have a full, healthy De La Vega, and then we'll have to bring in another DP, and who knows if that'll be a forward or a wing. But Seattle doesn't do it like a lot of other teams. I think LA knows that now. I think we hit on it a little earlier. Seattle doesn't go for the superstar names. They go for the players that will become superstars that no one's heard from South America.
Oh, that sounds like we have a super chat. Stephen Ma, Yeah, $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Stephen. He says Schmetzer is a genius. That's why.
Yeah, it's a. I was on the Schmetzer Out campaign earlier this year.
Oh,
Uh, he finished 3 points above the Sigi line, which is the thing that I coined on the Scuttlebutt podcast. It was like, at this date, this is how many points we had, and we fired Ziggy. If he's above that, we keep him. If he's below it, we fire him. He finished 3 points above that. That's one win. Maybe it was 2 points. He barely finished above that. But then the Sounders, I think, only lost one game the rest of the season. So everything changed.
Oh, we got another super chat. Hey, Adam, thank you so much, Adam. $2 super chat. And yes, I forgot who are Seattle's three DPs. Can you
Yeah,
please tell us, Cameron?
Raul Ruiz Diaz, who's coming off the bench,
Oh,
and
nice.
this will be his final year. You have De La Vega, Pedro De La Vega, who's a young player out of Argentina. He got hurt and then got it aggravated, which is why I think they brought him back too soon. So he was maybe mismanaged a little bit, but he is basically, he'd already be playing for Europe and starting on the Argentinian national team, but he blew out his knee at 21.
oh, damn.
So he's 22 now. And so this is his step to try and rebuild himself and be able to then go on and be that Argentinian star. But injuries have kind of hampered him. So he's the second one. And the third one is Rusnak out of he was the DP for RSL, and we brought him over, and he was playing out of position. So a lot of Seattle fans complained about him, although every time he touched the ball, he was great. He's playing right mid because we had Nico Ladero. But Nico's time was coming to an end, and it probably went on for a year longer than it should have. But as soon as they moved Rusnak over to that center attacking mid, he suddenly leads the team in assists. It's high. I think he might lead. He might lead in goals on the season, or equal with Jordan, maybe 13 goals, 8 assists, something like that. So it's those are our three right now, and next year, I mean, you could see maybe someone get paid down on a TAM level contract, but I would imagine a new DP, a new TAM for Seattle. So you're going to see some new faces.
Yeah.
Hey, Eddie, what's
I
something that we had asked for the longest time with LA Galaxy?
I was just asking for a chance to talk.
Welcome to the show, Eddie.
Thanks. No, hey, you know what? I admire a lot what Seattle does up there, right? You mentioned how like you guys do it different up there, but it's not so much different now if you really look at DPs, right? Now we have you got a Pikachu as well. I got my guy's back there.
Yeah, so I saw the Detective Pikachu back there. I had to bring mine up.
Oh, yeah, mine's like a derpy one. It's like not a real licensed one, but whatever. It'll do. Yeah, you know, we're going down that same path as you guys now, right? Ricky Puig was, I guess, you know, I don't want to call him a wash or anything over there in Barcelona, but he wasn't fitting in, right? Nobody seemed to want him out in Europe, so we took a chance there. Joseph Painsil, kind of the same thing. He was on his way out. We know whatever issues he had with his club. Can't say he was a big name either. Gabriel Peck, right? That was just great scouting. Those are like the kind of signings that MLS is made for, and the DP slots are made for. But you talked about a rebuild, right, or a project, and this is the plan. And you know, we're kind of the same in the same boat. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way we do down here. Do you feel that you guys have exceeded expectations? Is this where you guys thought you're gonna be going into the LAFC game? You know, did you think this was it? You know, going against the number one seed in the West. Thank you for that, by the way. But how do you guys see it? Do you guys feel that you guys are ahead of the curve, or is this, you know, exactly where you guys expected to be? Because obviously in Seattle, like you said, you average ending second. You guys have high standards out there.
I mean, I think that's it. We have high standards. Even we didn't make the playoffs after winning Champions League. And that was a year where you saw moments where it was easily the best Sounders team of all time. But and we've seen it in the next 2 years after that, this year and last year. There's moments where it's the best team of all time for the Sounders, which says a lot when you won the MLS in 2016, won it in 2019, played Greg Vanney in 2016 and 2017 in the MLS Cup final with Toronto. Won the Supporter Shield with Obafemi Martins and Clint Dempsey, but they never seemed to be able to gel at the same time. So I think our expectations are high, but this honestly is the first year where I went into games going, I don't expect us to win. The first time ever in our existence where I've come in and go, I'm going to this game not expecting to win because it didn't seem like we could do anything. And it turned around. And credit to the players. They have said, multiple players have said this. Christian Roldan said it in an interview, and I talked to Andy Thomas, our backup goalkeeper, who was our U.S. Open Cup keeper, that this is the closest Sounders team there's ever been for any of the players on that team. And some of it is they grew up together. You've had Paul Rothrock, who sadly is out for the season now, but he had been starting at left mid, and our starting center back, who was a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year, Jackson Reagan, played together since they were kids. They've been best friends since they were, 8, 10, 12 years old. So you had rolled on brothers, obviously are close, but then Jordan Morris, who all these younger players grew up idolizing because they were in the Sounders Academy and watched them playing with the Sounders. And then you also had players like Raul Ruiz-Diaz. So although he's frustrated, he's not getting his time, gives all his time to the young players and is there for them. So you've got this really tight-knit team that was able to come together and overcome these obstacles they were facing. And I think that's what's kept the team going, is they're not just playing for the fans. They're not just playing for the team. They're playing for themselves too. They're playing for each other. They're playing for their brother next to each other. So I think it's tough to say it. We were gonna beat LAFC, having not beat them in 10 consecutive games, having lost to them 4 times this year. But you know what? They held on, and that's what it is. I think the longer the match goes, the later it goes, the better a chance the Sounders have to win.
Hey, Cameron, how did it feel when we were in that MLS Battered Fans last week, right? And you had Ivan from LAFC say, "Yeah, we're gonna smash Seattle. It'll be 3-0." And then you look. I was just mentioning how we looked at the live chat, and the other LAFC fans were like, "No, don't say that. What's wrong with you?" I mean, we could laugh about it now, but I was just like, "Dude, come on."
It makes for good content, but I don't understand walking into any game that confident, right? Like, it comes down to execution, right? That's it. Like against LAFC, Seattle had figured out how to beat them. They just hadn't been executing. And you saw in US Open Cup, okay, they got close, but it took a penalty, which was questionable whether or not it was the penalty, to win it. And then they didn't give a penalty to us. So, of course, Bouanga had that penalty. But it was it's all about how do you match up and can you outcoach the team. The one thing that I worry about with Brian Schmetzer is they're brilliant at coming up with the plan and executing it, but oftentimes through subs, he gets outcoached in a game. You saw that happen against LAFC when they went from 5 to the back to 4 to the back and then absolutely dominated that first half of extra time. Like, it was scary. This is over. Those are 2 or 3 goals. But that's not what happened. And so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he was right. He knew the team could hold on. But as a fan, it felt like, what are we doing here? Why haven't we made subs to counter this?
But you also had Stephen Fry playing out of his mind, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is Steph is consistently one of the top goalies in the MLS who's never gotten his due. He's second all time in shutouts in the league, only behind, I believe, Nick Raimondo. So no one's catching him. Steph's got 1 year left, maybe, based on age and contract. And he is up for best goalkeeper in the league quite often, but never wins it. So the one area where he struggles, though, is penalties, because he comes off the line every single time. So ever since that rule has changed, and we saw it in that game versus Houston where he came off the line and they got to redo it on one of his saves. But it didn't matter. He still made the big save to beat Houston. Now, I was advocating leave a sub so you could sub in Andrew Thomas, who not only does save penalties, scored a penalty in the U.S. Open Cup for us to win against it was Sacramento, one of those teams from the USL. So Steph is amazing. He's consistently leveled up his game and will forever be a Sounders legend. We've been so lucky with goalkeepers in Sounders history. We've only had 3, and we've had backups, but our 3 starters: Casey Keller, USA legend; Sperning, Michael Sperning, most people haven't heard of, but was awesome, was always near the top of the league; and then Stephen Fry.
Hey, Eddie. So what would happen if Stephen Fry faces this LA Galaxy team and their penalty kick prowess?
Oh, good God. This is going to be like 20 rounds of penalties or something. I don't know what's going to happen.
Seattle hasn't missed a penalty yet in the
Oh, never mind.
playoffs.
Never mind.
I say advantage Seattle. Yeah.
That's why we need to get there.
No, but I was gonna mention that I was gonna say that Stephen Fry, yeah, he's gonna be a league legend, dude. He has like one of the biggest highlights for any goalkeeper in MLS Cup. That save against Toronto that was already behind him.
Yeah.
That save
It's
is
dubbed
nuts.
the save. I was at that game. That was wild. It was directly in front of me. I was as far to that side of the field as you could get, where the wind was blowing on me. It was 22 degrees out, felt like 15, just awful cold.
Jeez.
Couldn't feel my feet. I was dead on. That was the only one I thought was going in that whole game. And then thank you.
Super chat. Eddie, you want to handle that one?
Sure. Is there a team who has an advantage on wing backs? Oh, somebody had an opinion.
Yeah, there's an opinion.
I mean,
I think right now it's LA just because Seattle's hurt.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Because I mean, you're more familiar with what's going on right now. I was gonna give us the advantage. I'm personally not Roldan fans, so there's bias on my side, for that wingback position.
You don't like the brother that works for LA?
I'll tell you. No, it's mostly
He's all right.
Which is the U.S. national team one, Christian, right?
Christian, yeah.
Yeah, those kind of players drive me nuts, and I think Edgar feels the same way. I'm a U.S. national team fan, and I hate when players light it up in the MLS, and then they throw on the U.S. jersey, and it's just way too heavy from. And
yeah, well, he's not there for that reason, though. He's on the USA to be a leader in the locker room. I mean, he's not expected to see minutes when he goes out there. He's expected to be there for the young players and coach them. I mean, and he's a right mid, not a right back. So
isn't the other Roldan?
His brother is a right back.
Yeah.
He plays for El Salvador. So they could have played for 3 different teams based on their parents and being U.S. citizens. So Christian chose U.S. and I believe that it's their mom is from El Salvador and their dad's from Guatemala, and they chose and he chose El Salvador. So Alex plays down there.
Gotcha. And then I don't know how familiar you are with our wingbacks, but man, John Nelson.
I mean, he's been hot this year, right? It's someone you don't expect to be a star that is turning into one.
Yeah, just some luck with that injury on a kid that we were all banking on in Alde, and all of a sudden John Nelson came in, took that spot, and he never let it go. Earned his nickname, John the Rock Nelson.
Yeah, with Johnny Nelson, when we first got him, I spoke to Matt Baker from Flyover Footy. He covers St. Louis City, and he mentioned how interesting the irony that uh, John Nelson lost his starting spot with City after there was an injury to Klaus, and then his production kind of went down because he had this synergy with Klaus on the as they worked up and down that sideline, and he just wasn't able to find the same thing, and so eventually he was benched, and then I'm sure that must have like burned with him, and then we ended up getting him, and he was like, Matt said that Nelson is a really good player. You just got to give him the opportunity, and you put him in the right system, and he's going to flourish. At the time, we had Julian Alde over there, a youngster who came over from Lanús in Argentina, and so he was looked at as not just the future, but somebody who could grow as the team grew
He's
along with
early
him.
20s, right? He's young.
Yeah, he's a young man. Yeah, and the thing was about him was like, yeah, he came over, and right after he came over, there's a death in his family. So, some people, it takes some people grieve, differently, and sometimes people it takes a while to grieve. So, and then he suffered an injury. So there's a lot of setbacks for him. Granted, when he's on, but then he got injured. John Nelson stepped in, and my God, did he take that and run with it? Because when Julian Alde was finally able to come back, there's no way he's taking that position away from Johnny Nelson. And I'll keep pointing out the fact that you go to the stadium and you will see some people walking around wearing John Nelson kits now, and I was like, wow, that's fascinating.
What do y'all think about Eric Zavaleta? I know he's only had 4 appearances, but I'm curious because he's a former forward for the Sounders. Who they moved to center back. Yeah, he was a forward when he came into the league, but his uncle is, of course, the coach, and so he followed his uncle, I believe, Was he involved with Chivas USA in some way down there? Because Zavaleta went there
Zavaleta?
first and then followed his
I think he
uncle.
was there, and then he went to TFC.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the coach, was he down in at was he assistant
Yes,
down there?
he was there along with Dan Calichman and Robin Fraser. They were all
Yeah,
involved
so that
with
makes
Chivas
sense.
USA.
So he left Seattle, went down there, then went to Toronto and followed his uncle there. So here's a guy that went from forward to, I would say, a league average center back.
Uh,
The man who eats his pupusas with a fork and a knife.
I mean,
we we have another
man,
super chat.
the man is Salvadorian, and they released a list of what these players would bring to a Thanksgiving potluck, and he came up with zucchini casserole. Zucchini casserole.
So we do have a super chat. Hey Eddie, what to say?
Wait, just real quick. He's from Indiana, so let's.
Yeah.
It all makes sense now. Yeah, super chat from Stephen Ma. $2. Mikovic should be our PK shootout specialist. Nope, should not. You forget that John McCarthy stepped up in a final after
A final, right?
Yeah, a final MLS Cup after I forgot his name. Whatever, the other guy that played for that.
Crepeau.
Crepeau. I was trying to forget his name on purpose. No, I'm just kidding. After he broke his leg and basically was a hero in the penalty shootout, so I think that's the guy you actually want in the goal when it comes to penalties.
Okay. Well, speaking of broken legs and broken things, let's get into the match and talk about the injury report. With LA Galaxy, just two things. One is Martin Cáceres still out. He's probably done. If you have a Martin Cáceres kit, hold on to it because he's not coming back next year. It's a collector's item. The second thing, and this is per Rob Halon from Lacuna Galaxiana. Shout out to Lacuna. He reported that Greg Vanny revealed today that Marco Roche is dealing with a small knock that he picked up in Galaxy's 6-2 win over Minnesota. So it's something to keep in mind as we head into the weekend. What do you have to report for us, Cameron?
Rough coming out of Seattle.
How much time we got?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess you broke the news to me off mic before this, but we were missing New Hutolo last match, who went back home to Cameroon to play during the international break and got sick, and had not come back to the United States yet. Was unable to travel. He did get back into the States yesterday, but had yet to be seen by team doctors. But Edgar, you said that an LA person said he's likely to play. Is that what you heard?
That is correct. That's also our buddy there, Rob Halon. He was down at the stadium today. Watched the players training, and he did mention that he's likely to play in this upcoming match. But apparently, Rothrock. Any updates on
Rothrock
him?
out for the season. You know, he had been youth player for the Sounders, came up along, I mentioned him earlier, along with Jackson Reagan, really kind of struggled to make it to the next level. And then something clicked and he went all in, and he's been fantastic on the left for Seattle this year and basically made it so Leo Chu, who's a U22, got no more minutes. So he's been dominant, but yeah, out for the season. Most importantly, though, Yamar, Yamar Andrade Gomez, our starting center back, last year finished third in Defensive Player of the Year. This year, still, I mean, we had people in Seattle, media people and players, not vote for him over Reagan for Defensive Player of the Year this year when Reagan finished third. 50-50 to play was the word from Schmetzer yesterday on our local KGR Sports Radio when he appeared with Softy and Dick there. And so it's been it's a scary thing, right? There's one of the better defenders in the league who is shut down Bouanga, but then got hurt. So that's a big if question mark. And then Reed Baker Whiting, who had replaced who had gone in for Rothrock last match, is 50-50 to play. Did I say 50-50 for Yamar? 60-40 is where Schmetzer put that at. So more likely than not to see Yamar, but still questionable. And I would say you just don't know about the Whiting. So last game they played 5 at the back instead of 4. I don't know what you do. I think it depends on who's available.
Well, I hope you guys have at least enough players to field.
we do. There'll be young players that come in and fill those spots, or you can always move Jordan Morris back to the left where he's been his whole career up until last year, and put Raul Ruidiaz, I think the leading scorer all time in Sounders history, and throw him up there.
And
Rui Diaz, who we affectionately know as Apocalipto. Not remember that movie. Yeah. We do have a super chat. Super chat. Adam, $5. Thank you so much, Adam. We really appreciate your support. He asks, how would you guys rate Mickey Yaman's performance this season and being his first season, and not just in LA Galaxy, but in MLS? Eddie?
oh, me? Okay. It's a I mean, towards the end of the season, it's a lot better. I think there were some like questionable runs. He still made some of the same mistakes. Overall, great, right? He's a great player, and he will be for many years as long as he's in a Galaxy kit. But
He's on the right side, opposite.
yeah, yeah,
Don.
yeah. You know what? No, he is. He definitely is great because I'm looking back at the last LAFC game, right, where he was leaving Jalen Neal on an island, but
Oh,
this
yeah.
guy is very coachable, right? He went into the locker room. Vanny told him what had to be done, and then all of a sudden, that right side was no longer an issue. So he's definitely been great, and obviously he has something special in the attack as well, right? He has a lot of flair. He has a great eye. He hits some great passes. That one he did with John Nelson's only goal was an amazing play. So overall, look at Cameron can't stop smiling. Oh, I'm stuck too. Oh,
Both of
damn.
you froze. Look at
Oh,
that.
no. Well, I'm going to beautify myself, and it'll fix it.
That's what it is.
Yeah, one of
At
the
least
things about Yamane that we admired so much is not only like he's very good on defense. He's not the greatest, but he's good enough, and he has that combination with our captain Maya Yoshida, since they both played for the Japanese national team. But the one thing that we admire about him is the fact that, like Eddie said, he goes forward, he can create, and he was one of the people that led to that third goal for El Galaxy, where oh my God, Joseph Pinto scored. Um, as we get into
His best game of the season was the away game at San Jose, where y'all won 3-0.
oh
That
yeah, that was really early in the season. I remember.
was his most dominant game. That was back in June, it looks like. And
Yeah,
since then, it's been better at home than away, but pretty good down the stretch.
yeah. So moving on, because as we're getting deeper into this match, my God, I somebody asked me this morning, "Hey, have you seen who's going to be officiating the game?" And so I was like, "No, not yet." It's funny. Look, real quick, if you guys are listening just on audio, but Eddie's image is frozen in the same exact pose that it froze the last time we had him on. So I don't know, something's up with that pose. Maybe there's a ghost in the machine or something. I don't know, or maybe the Wide Six finally got him. If you're a WWE fan, they probably got him. So real quick, yeah, we're getting into the referee, and I know that a lot of people will say, "Oh my God, Ted Uncle, Ted Uncle's okay," but it's not
No,
Ted Uncle.
Ted
It's,
Uncle.
some people will say, "Oh, it's Salazar." No, Salazar's not that bad for us. Or Marufo, no, it's not that bad. No,
No,
my friends,
these are all awful people. What are you talking
my
about?
friend. MLS decided to roll out the devil incarnate himself and gave us Drew Fisher. um, but just to make things a little bit more interesting, your fourth official is Cameron's favorite, Ted Uncle.
Uncle Fucker. No, I mean he's not. He's not the worst. He's not the worst, but uh, and Kevin Stott on VAR. My God, I'm just. It
It's
is.
the all-star team, right?
Oh, I mean, the only thing. Although he's been better, Daniel Radford did VAR for one of the Houston matches, and it wasn't his fault. But he refed as center ref a game in the U.S. Open Cup that is known affectionately as the Red Card Wedding. That got
Damn.
Dempsey banned from the U.S. Open Cup for several years, where Dempsey took his red card and tore it up. And so, if you've never seen that, go look at those highlights because he it was his first game, one of his first games as the center ref, and I don't know what U.S. Soccer was thinking, put him in there, but yeah, Salazar is another one where we would, although he got better in time, but he cost us a U.S. Open Cup victory at Kansas City one year, so we are short one trophy because of him. So you have Ted Uncle, who's the other guy that used to be the ref and went to the World Cup and stuff like that and came back. There's another one
Elsbeth, I think.
that was Geiger.
Oh, Matt Geiger. Yes,
Yeah,
Matt Geiger.
It became a verb. You've been Geigered. So
The Geiger counter.
so yeah, I mean, I don't. It's funny because Drew Fisher. I mean, you put those stats up. Maybe you could read those.
Oh,
We
yeah.
don't like
I'm
him
gonna
in
go into it.
Seattle, but we also don't. He's not a name that we hate. He's just a name.
You guys should love him in Seattle, and I'll tell you why right now. All right, guys, get steady. Okay, if you're a Galaxy fan,
Get ready.
take a deep breath, steady yourself, because here we go. Drew Fisher has been in MLS since 2012. 198 MLS regular season matches and 9 MLS Cup playoff matches. 20 of those with LA Galaxy for a total of 3 wins, 5 draws, and 12 losses, including a record of 1 win, no draws, and 5 losses at home. Meanwhile, with the Sounders, 21 total games, 9 wins, 10 draws, and guess what? Only 2 losses all time, including 4 wins, 3 draws, and just 1 loss on the road for Seattle. Um, you guys will remember him very fondly. Fisher's last LA Galaxy match was the 2-1 El Tráfico loss to LAFC at the Rose Bowl this 4th of July, where he gave out 2 yellows to LA Galaxy, 1 to LAFC. Meanwhile, his last Sounders match was a 2-0 win over Sporting Kansas City just recently on September 15th, 2024. He gave 1 yellow to Seattle, 2 to SKC. And in case you're wondering, in 2024, he's averaging 4 yellows per game. He only handed out 2 red cards the entire season, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he was named referee of the year.
I mean, we
But
this game.
yeah, recent.
but
I mean, say is true of some of the other refs in the league right now. So I will say I appreciate him for that, but still, we
you
hate
should
him.
appreciate him for a lot more.
I know all those wins.
Yeah, the last time LA Galaxy won a game with him across all competitions was a 3-1 win at Houston on October 9th, 2022. That was more than 2 years ago. In the matches between Galaxy and Sounders with Fisher as a referee, Galaxy have never won, with a record of no wins, 3 draws, and 1 loss.
Does that mean we're going to a draw in this match? We're going to penalties?
God, no, man. Goodness. So I know that last night we were on the MLS Battle Fans and they asked us for predictions, and I said, I could, I see Galaxy winning, and everybody pretty much agreed. Galaxy should win this match, and then, and then you see the the ref, and oh my god, like my blood went, like my blood started running cold when I saw who it was, and I was like, oh no, oh no. And if you see the reaction from Galaxy fans after I posted this on Twitter and Blue Sky, yeah. But Cameron, tell us how you feel.
Well, let
I
me
mean,
add. Let's merge these two things together, right?
Go
Because
for it, Eddie.
yeah.
we're gonna make Cameron all extra confident right now.
No.
So besides the Galaxy and Seattle history, there's also a history between Vanny and Schmetzer, obviously MLS
Yeah.
Cups. But the record head to head with Vanny and Schmetzer, Vanny has a record of 4 wins. I'm gonna go out of order here: 3 draws and 10 losses. All right, and then two of those losses. Well, actually, no, one of those losses, right, was an MLS Cup.
Yeah,
So
1-1.
yeah, so
Actually, that might count as a draw because I went to penalty kicks. So that
That
may
is
be one of the draws.
that is true, but ultimately he still lost. So I mean, does that give you guys any kind of confidence? Schmetzer also you got over the hump with LAFC as well. I mean, is it too much to ask in your guys' opinion? Now with the ref on your team as well.
You know,
Whoa.
I think
Is
it
that
depends
thunder?
on what. So you're right. Schmetzer seems to have Greg Vanny's number. It depends on something that Edgar actually said last night on the Battered Fans podcast, which is how is Seattle doing fatigue wise? Because at the end of that last match, they looked just dead. And so, what's this week been like? Are they ready to come back and ready to go? Are the injured players healthy, or are the people that are coming in for them, are they stepping up and viewing their job like it's next man up, let's go? And so I think that will say a lot about what's going to happen. I'm not that. So in my mind, the best thing a ref can do is not be involved in the game more than they have to be. And that's actually where I don't think the Sounders have been so good under Drew Fisher, because he's making calls our way. Because if you look at the breakdown of those games, we're not getting significantly less yellow cards or fouls. I went in and looked at it after Edgar shared that information. I think he's just a ref that lets the game go. And so, unless it gets out of control. So that's why he's not giving red cards. So I think that a lot of it will come down to, can Seattle's defense hold up against the barrage of LA's offense? And I think it'll be similar to that LAFC game where, unless LA scores in the first half, you're going to go into the second half and they're going to be 45 minutes left. And as time goes on, that pressure is going to start growing on the Galaxy to score. And I think if Galaxy do come through with a shot, I think they end up winning 2-0. But if it goes to penalties, it's anyone's ball game. And I would give Seattle the edge in penalties.
I'm gonna add one more wrinkle to all this because navigating who's gonna win, trying to figure out who's gonna win. Right? We talked about the injuries. We talked about how Seattle expended so much energy to beat LAFC. There's injuries on that side, but then you talk about Greg Vanny's record against Schmetzer, and one more thing to add: Galaxy have never lost at home to Seattle in the playoffs, holding a record of 3 wins, no draws, and no losses. Eddie, how do you feel? Let's get into predictions, my friend.
Predictions. Hold on. Let me sip my sparkling water here.
I'll sip from my really cool Vancouver Whitecaps
Yeah.
cup.
Yeah, kind of funny. It's not the teams you guys root for, but whatever. That's
Well,
just me.
it was earned.
They're
This is
Canadian.
what you
They're
get.
friendly.
This is what it's called, earning the iron price right here. Right? We did not pay the golden price for this. You earned it. You had to go there.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Maybe
Okay,
one of
so
these
let's get
days.
into his predictions. Eddie, do you want to go first? Or do you want to let Cameron go first?
Sure, I can go. Or you remember this? Or actually,
I mean, I basically said mine already, so I can
uh,
reiterate. I mean,
I go for it.
is I think 2-0 LA is my prediction. But if the Sounders can just keep taking that barrage, and Schmetzer doesn't get out coached in subs, this isn't the first time that we've had Vanny where we've had a good defense. MLS Cup 2016, no shots on goal, still won the championship. So I don't think there'll be no shots on goal, but it's all going to come down to communication in the back between Nuhu if he plays, Yamar if he plays, Reagan and Alex Roldan. And if they can effectively stay with Fry and Fry can make saves like he did last game, I think Seattle wins in penalties. But I'm not confident because of the injuries, so that's why I'm giving it 2-0 to LA.
Yeah. I'm somewhere like in a 3-1 LA. I think we're still good for one. I still think defense still is a little bit questionable, right? But I watched that game of Seattle versus LAFC, and when they were going to overtime, I thought that Seattle was going to lose because you guys just like gassed, right? It was like I don't know how they're even going to walk off the field after those 30 minutes, but the LFC kind of squeezed by some other teams, right? They're very forgiving, especially like in the later half of the season. They were just barely getting by teams, and I think we're gonna see maybe a similar game, maybe even a more tired Seattle. But the Galaxy isn't as forgiving, as you can see how many goals they've put up. Fry can only do so much. All respects to Fry, but I think it's just going to be a little too much for Seattle to handle, and I feel like a comfortable 3-1 win for the Galaxy.
Seattle has not given up 3 goals, except for against LAFC in the Leagues Cup quarterfinal. That was, and then against, so not since Leagues Cup, and then against Nakasa.
Yeah.
So I mean that they're if getting 3 goals against Seattle is tough, and that's why the number 1 defense in the league. But I do think the reason why it could go that way, same reason why I think it could be 2-0, is that it's a playoff game, right? You got to win. So Seattle will start pushing forward, which can allow for counterattack. And we've seen mistakes from our outside backs that have allowed for goals to be scored. But don't underestimate that defense. That's all.
No. But then again, no one's had an answer for Peck. You know, that's the thing too. You know, I think like Minnesota even put out like a tweet, we're doing our homework or studying Peck or something. Look how that went. You know, like, it's just the guy is something else, right? We're seeing something special.
Yep.
Happen in front of our eyes. So that's the main thing. That there's no answer for him, and then the guy's not selfish either, right? If you draw your attention to him, he's gonna find somebody else, and we have a lot of people that can hurt you, and you guys are hurt. You guys are limping in, so
that's why if Yaymar's not in there, it's not going to be pretty. I think late, but if he's there, he's good at shutting down players. So we'll see what happens, but I think talent wise, LA has the proven talent. Seattle's injured and is playing with some young players who are still trying to prove themselves. So it'll come down to, can Seattle prove it? Right now, you've got to pick LA.
Yeah, but then you guys have Schmetzer too. Like Schmetzer cannot be underestimated, and then there is like the psychological
mental aspect. Yeah,
that Schmetzer may have over Manny's. So
Vanny did beat next year. Toronto beat Seattle in Toronto, so we had 2 years straight there. But you're right. Overall, Schmetzer's owned him.
Yeah. So it could go a lot of ways. We can be talking here, and then like Brian put in the chat, it can go 20-0. We don't know.
Oh dear, oh God. So I did mention that LA Galaxy is undefeated versus Seattle in the playoffs at home, right? But the last Galaxy victory, not just at home, but in the playoffs in general, against Seattle was 10 years ago, 2014. So can LA Galaxy do it, right? Can LA Galaxy finally break through against Seattle, which is funny because it used to be Seattle trying to break through against the Galaxy back in the day. I do believe that it will happen. It won't be easy. I know Eddie mentioned a 3-1 comfortable victory. I don't think it's going to be comfortable at all. There's so many factors to take into account. I think it'll be 2-1. Galaxy will be up 2-1 late into the match. And at this point, Seattle will be playing really hard to try to draw things even, and tired legs. I mean, you did so much against LAFC, went into extra time, and eventually that does catch up to you. And I think LA Galaxy comes in, a lot fresher. They haven't had to expend that much energy when against Colorado and Minnesota because they took them out early, and I feel like LA Galaxy will grind them out, and at the end, just pick up a goal in garbage time, make it 3-1. But a lot of respect to Seattle because they're not an easy club, man. They got this far for a reason, and you have to give that respect to a club like Seattle, unlike the noisy neighbors. So
hey, you know what's happening though? Whoever wins is hosting the MLS Cup and is going to be. That's what matters.
And that's crazy because right, like, neither fan base could confidently have said that they felt like they were going to host MLS Cup. So,
right. I mean, in Seattle, we've been watching the whole time. This is what needs to happen in order to host. And so we've been keeping track because we hosted in 2019, and it's an amazing experience. I have been to an MLS Cup final where LA played, 2009, when it was we
don't talk about that here.
I got my entire section chanting "Beat LA." So because that you're coming out of the Supersonics just leaving, and LA and the Lakers versus the Sonics being an actual, well, at that time not a rivalry because the Sonics have been bad for a few years, but growing up in the 80s and 90s, that was a real rivalry. And so you had always LA versus Seattle in all the sports. So now I would not I mean, I think things have changed. We always hated LA Galaxy, but with LAFC coming into the league, LA Galaxy are friends now. It's LAFC we hate.
Yeah,
everybody says that. we talked to so many pods across the last couple years, and everybody has something to say about LAFC, and it's not to like pow on them, but I was just like, what the heck is it? It's funny.
Douchebags.
Well,
That's
Yeah,
don't be surprised. By the way, don't be surprised if let's say Seattle wins, right? And you're hosting MLS Cup, and you see like a group of people show up to the a little bit later to the game, and as they're walking into the stadium wearing Sounders kits, you see a little LAFC tattoo peeking out from under the shirt, right?
I've never lived in a city with two teams, so I can't say how I would feel, but it feels wrong. I have a few friends that say root for the Giants and the A's. I mean, I guess the A's are gone now, sadly, but uh, I don't understand it. I feel like you got to choose a team.
Yeah, it'd be like if somebody showed up to let's see, back in the day, a Sonics game, and they're wearing like a Sonics jersey, and underneath they had like a little Portland Blazers logo.
That was a real rivalry too. Now I actually root
Yeah,
for the Blazers because we haven't had a team since 2008. The Sounders came right after the Sonics left. 2008 was maybe the worst sports season for any team, any city in history, with the Washington Huskies going 0-12 in football, the Mariners losing 100 games, the
yeah.
Supersonics leaving, and we got granted an MLS franchise as as they said in the Onion. They said this is the worst experience yet getting an MLS franchise.
Damn.
But oh no, who get out of here? Is that
Oh,
your bad
hey,
typing?
Eddie's a
You
Laker
don't even
fan.
understand,
oh,
Misty.
mine's are right here.
You don't even understand that. I mean, our team was stolen. Like I said earlier, I produced a documentary on this called Sonics Gate that you can go watch. Get
Yeah.
out of here with that OKC
I
garbage.
would, I would, I'd,
Damn.
hey, you
You
know
got
what?
him pissed off.
This is easy. This is easy. It's easy to figure out who did it. I'm a Laker fan. The other two are bitter Clipper fans. So
Bitter. I'm not bitter at all, dude.
Hey, you got Steve. You got our Sonics owner, the guy that should have bought the team
Yeah.
for us. You down
I'm
there,
not
Steve
bitter at
Ballmer.
all. We have a new stadium. We have like nice new
Well,
uniforms. The team sucks, but hey,
mhm.
at least we got a nice something
Because
to build on.
that's what it's about, right?
Yeah, but you don't have Bronny starting.
That's true. Well, he's not there anymore. It was just a marketing ploy. That's all it was. Well, Cameron, man, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciated having you on here and shedding some light on what's going on with the Sounders, how that season was so topsy turvy.
Yeah.
And well, now we're all gonna sit and wait to see what happens on Saturday. I know it's gonna be really tense, right? Leading up to that match. Oh, look at it. Chewy. If Chewy posted puro pinche Spurs. He's a Spurs fan because he's from Texas.
Get out of here, Spurs. Come on. People complain about LeBron flopping. No way. They Spurs had the worst floppers in the history of the league with Ginobili. That guy
Manu. I
flopped,
knew you were gonna say Manu.
cost the Sonics a playoff game. The only good thing about the Spurs is Pop. Everyone else, screw him.
Yeah. Hopefully Pop gets better soon, by the way.
Yep.
It's kind of sad to hear he had that mild stroke. He's such an important figure, not just in the NBA, but in sports in general.
Yep. Agreed.
But yeah, and once again, thank you, Cameron. Thanks for everyone for joining us. Eddie, thank you for jumping in on the midweek show. Brian for producing. If this is our last midweek show of the year, I mean, it could happen. Thanks to everyone who has tuned in this entire year. Hopefully, we can provide you guys with another episode next year. I mean, next week. Obviously, whether it's Seattle or LA that advances to MLS Cup, hey, you know what? There's nothing like a West Coast party because the West Coast party don't stop.
Yep.
Right?
West Coast, West Coast.
And I know, Cameron, hey, baby, we always say here, for me, Wu-Tang for life, baby.
Yep. Wu-Tang.
Wu-Tang. Take us
Wu-Tang.
out, Brian. Thanks.
Later, Brian.
Wu-Tang.
Where's
What's up,
that?
Eddie?